Okay, so welcome back to our Friday morning meeting. It's been pretty busy the last 2 weeks. I'm gonna let Shannon tell you where we are right now. And then we have a few items for tonight or this morning that I think Shannon sent out in an email, and we may have added one or two, I'm not sure, with like the new recommendation stuff. So Shannon, why don't I turn it over to you and you can lead us through this if you're willing to do that.
Sure. So the recommendations that you all made to the implementation committee, they looked at on Wednesday and they agreed with all of them. The only thing they changed was some language in the one that said, remember the one we talked about where it had downtown prioritized funding, the downtown corridor trail and the Green Crescent Trail. And we changed it to say prioritize funding for connections between the university and the city along 93 and 133. They just wanted to make sure specifically it also included College Avenue to 133, which I thought was in keeping with what we had discussed. So they made that change. So next, those will go to Planning Commission. We're working that out. They'll likely go to the next Planning Commission meeting, which is in about 2 weeks. And then from there on to City Council. So those are that's the update on the recommendations you guys made. See, Chad, I see you have a chat. The end result, based on feedback that we got from city staff, is most of these recommendations are already in the comprehensive plan. So it'll be some sort of, as they work through kind of where these go, most of them will end up in the comprehensive plan and be called out as strategic items. One of the other things we discussed with the implementation committee that I'd like to get your feedback on is how do we maintain accountability for these items moving forward? And we discussed creating a separate ClemsonNext accountability committee, where after these recommendations are adopted by council, we put together a committee that's mostly citizens with a citizen chair with representation from each of the work groups. So housing, this committee, land use, and set up a regular schedule where they are checking in on all of these strategic growth items to make sure that progress is being made and they can hold City Council more accountable for moving forward on these items. That way, I know when this process started, not everybody signed up for a 3-year term on the traffic transportation committee. So that way, that'll be a separate commitment that people can think about and make as a longer term commitment if you wish. This committee, if it works for everyone, and I think what Fran has talked about is continue to meet not every week, maybe bi-weekly or monthly, to dig into the strategies associated with these items once they're adopted by council. But that's kind of where we are as far as setting up longer term accountability and where these items end up.
And I think, Shannon, correct me if I'm wrong too, that part of the discussion with the ClemsonNext is that many of our recommendations won't have to be approved by planning because they're not going to require changes in ordinance or codes, Chad. That most of them are just action items that need to be filled out with changes or additions to how we do things. But I think maybe 1 or 2 will have something that will require a change in zoning or the codes. And I'm sure from the housing subgroup, there'll be more, but Shannon, I'm right that was why most of ours won't be voted on by planning commission. They'll just have to sort of give it a, it's okay with us because it's not going to require zoning changes, at least the way it looks now. I mean, as we sort of think specifics, there may be some things that we have to do, but I don't think that generally ours is viewed from that perspective for implementation.
Right. The planning commission members that are on the implementation committee thought that these, for the planning commission, our recommendations would be informational only, that they wouldn't have to vote on anything in there.
My hope is just that, sometimes they're codes, but more often they're budget items. And I think one of our problems over the years has been good intentioned projects that are just disjointed and not. And to me, the best thing about ClemsonNext was it was at our best strategic, and it was focused, and it was focused on problems. So I hope if the accountability committee is the way to do it, that's great. just making sure we, council members primarily who make the budget, are thinking about this and putting all their projects that they budget through this lens for all these things. That's my hope.
One thought or one question, kind of to follow up with Chad's. I mean, I think a lot of jurisdictions fall into that trap of having a really solid strategic or comprehensive plan, but if there's not changes to the regulations, then it's, or like the budgetary processing and all of that. An idea or just a thought, the city of Greenville recently went through this process, and they are updating and overhauling their land management ordinance. That might not be necessary in Clemson, but they also adopted a consistency policy that just basically said, like, every decision they make, they will try to be consistent with the recommendations of their comprehensive plan. I forget the exact wording, but it was just something to sort of keep top of mind. And they left it flexible enough that if there's, some sort of reason to be inconsistent, that it wouldn't be like they were trapping themselves. But just again, a thought, I guess, and one question, I guess, where is Clemson in the budgeting process right now?
So council's meeting the next 3 or 4 weeks. I'm not sure the actual date, Lisa, to approve the budget that's been proposed for the upcoming year.
Okay, so that's
The
already
budget's been prepared, and then we're going to have a budget meeting. And then I think that either probably at the next council meeting, then we'll approve that budget.
It would be interesting to see how I'm sure the budget lines up pretty well with the priorities in ClemsonNext, but do you feel it does, Fran?
Again, I haven't seen the full budget, but from what I've seen and heard, I think a lot of the budget's not that different than it has been. I don't think there's a lot of innovative, creative applications, but I think it includes money for things that could fall under the kind of ClemsonNext things, if that's the way we decide to go with it, and if that fits with the staff ability. So I don't know that there are many items directly that you could point that out as coming from ClemsonNext, but I think the way that some of the budget is delivered, or what the money is used for, will be directly linked to ClemsonNext, but I don't know that for a fact. But I do know, in my vast experience as a council member, which is now all of 25 or 26 months, I certainly get much more of a sense that the council means business in terms of doing these things that we're talking about, as opposed to, we put it on the shelf with all the other great plans. I mean, it's pretty much present in everybody's mind. And I think it helps that a couple of the council members were, involved in ClemsonNext. So I do think it's going to happen this way. Now, maybe, for instance, though, when, for instance, if there's money allocated for streets, the way that that's spent for streets or sidewalks will be looked at, I would think, from the framework of the ClemsonNext and the comprehensive plan very more specifically than in the past.
I'm going to put this as homework for everybody to look at later, but for whatever reason, I was looking at the budget in Fort Collins, Colorado, which I think has we're a bigger town, but we have a lot to learn from in terms of transportation. And their budget is very much oriented around their strategic plan. And I think it's just really interesting how integrated it is. And it's something maybe we could aspire to where every line item, instead of just here's the department's budget, it's here's this part of our strategic plan's budget. And it just seems like it's a totally different way of budgeting, but I look at it as a citizen and it makes complete sense to me. Here's the cultural part of our budget. Here's the transportation streets part of our budget. And so I don't know, I don't think that's a conversation to diverse on right now, but Fran, I think that might be interesting to look at. And I was pretty impressed by it.
Yeah. Thanks, Chad.
Okay, there was one thing that came up in the implementation committee that I think is a recommendation. Bob Brookover brought this up at council on Monday night that does pertain to us, and we could add it to our recommendations at this point before they go to planning commission if we want. But I think it's worth us discussing. Is he made the recommendation of lowering the speed limit on all neighborhood streets to 15 miles per hour. So Fran, you can help me. I don't believe this includes like the connector streets that we've talked about, like Berkeley and Issaquena, but I believe he was talking about simply like the neighborhood streets that within neighborhoods that don't connect out to larger streets.
Right, and a quick history on this, the city council received an email from a citizen who was concerned that her street had a lot of traffic, and it was a street that led towards the school. And she wanted to know, she actually talked about speed bumps and other kind of things. And then Chief Campos went out and he sort of figured out that there was a very mixed speed limit. Some streets were 20, some streets were 15, and there was no uniformity. And what his solution there was, he actually did put up signs indicating the speed limit. And I think he added some stop signs in terms of speed suppression. I think Bob saw that and got the thought that first we need some uniform speed limit on neighborhood streets. And I think Bob's was 15, I think was his suggestion. So that's where this came from, kind of I think Bob actually used this term, a safer streets approach to speed and traffic suppression in neighborhoods. I think if we want to approve that recommendation, maybe even expand it a little bit, that probably be a good idea. And that's sort of just an aside very quickly. One of the examples where I get the sense that council means business, right? I mean, immediately we could be looking at speed limits and those kind of things that really do have an impact on some of the things we recommend. And I think there's the desire to do that as efficiently and as effectively as we can. But anyway, so that was the history of it. And then Bob, I think, and he talked to someone else too, thought 15 miles an hour in neighborhood streets, but not, you're right, not Berkeley Drive and truly the neighborhood streets.
You guys have any input on that? Thoughts?
I'll put a couple of links, and I've been reading a lot about this, just in studying transportation and pedestrian movement, and speed. Speed is one of the most directly correlated issues with safety. So the higher the speed, the more likely somebody is to die being hit, both as a pedestrian biker, also as a in a car. And so to me, it's it makes the one of the biggest travesties is that we have roads that are built for high speeds that are in neighborhoods and or cutting through neighborhoods. So I'm all for it. And we don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's a movement called 20 is plenty that actually Greenville tried to work on in the last year or so that I don't know how much traction it made, but basically making the point that unless you're on a 123 highway in between two places, if you have people living there, 20 is plenty. And because every 5 miles per hour you go above 20, it starts increasing fatalities dramatically. And so I don't know, if I'm making the decision to make speed policies in the city, I don't know how you in good conscience can allow it to be higher and still knowing those stats. So it's something I'm pretty adamant about. And I think it's also, we've talked about this in past meetings, the DOT is a big elephant in the room in terms of having speed limits that are on their roads that have very much a through town objective. Let's get people from one place to another without congestion and as fast as we can, as opposed to let's let our kids cross the street to get to elementary school as safely as possible. That's not I know that's their objective, to be safe, but it's not the way that roads are engineered, and that's not the way the speed limits are made. So if we can make that as a policy recommendation, I would be all for it. And I would love to go even farther than that and start asking and requiring our city to build roads that are narrower, and then and try to work with DOT to do the same thing.
And I think it would include other things. I think, for instance, signage, because a lot of streets you don't even know the speed limit. Crosswalks that are well marked. Speed bumps were appropriate. I'm not a big supporter of speed bumps, but any combination that makes the appropriate accommodations to make safer streets. And I think, Shannon, if we could actually make that broader recommendation, I think that would help if we're willing to do that. But I do, again, this is a good example. I think the sense that everybody's on board with the ideas behind ClemsonNext and this committee. The fact that the chief went out within a matter of days and started looking at speed limits and signage and stop signs, that's pretty significant to me.
I've noticed, the only thing I've noticed, and it seems like now, not that the delivery truck people are zipping through because they have time that now, and I want, maybe it's just because their trucks are larger and they're moving, but I don't, it's just, but it does seem like and we have a lot of delivery trucks now going around delivering all kinds of stuff. It does seem like they're in a hurry. I don't know if they're going too far over the speed limit, but it does seem like they're in a hurry to get from one place to another, which in talking with those drivers, they are.
Are we talking about 15 miles per hour as a speed limit? Because to me, that seems, and the 20 mile per hour, I agree with. I think for neighborhoods, that would be good. But 15 seems a little, I don't, just thinking about looking in the car and driving in the car and what you're looking at, trying to keep it under 15 miles an hour is pretty darn slow. And then just to sort of follow up with, as we're trying, if we're narrowing roads, we need to be putting in sidewalks, because one of the big problems, at least in my neighborhood where I walk a lot, isn't so much the speeding. I mean, the people here, that is fine, but it's the fact that we have no sidewalks and we have a lot of really sharp curves that people are coming around. So it's more of a place that I just don't have a safe place to walk.
Shannon, was it 15 or 20 that Bob recommended?
Bob recommended 15. And I think that was the number because that's what they did in the street by the school, is they changed that to 15. I think if we want to recommend 20, we can put 20 in our recommendation if you guys want, and send, then they can, council and planning commission can talk about both.
I'd say at least 20. I think there's appropriate places that 15 is appropriate. I mean, going down I've tried to do this. My wife and I have been just kind of conscious of this. Try to drive downhill on Berkeley Drive at 20 miles per hour, and you will get people like livid with you because road rage is real, but I don't know. And Renee, I wasn't for narrowing roads. It's more in particular the Berkeley drives, the roads that people are, kind of through roads. I think in the neighborhoods, they're already 10 feet. So you narrow those, we're kind of going in the ditches. But if you look at some of the requirements are ludicrous in the land development, speaking of codes, where there's some towns that require new construction developments to have 12 to 13 foot wide lanes going through a subdivision on a cul-de-sac. And that's not only a waste of money because we have to repave all those roads, but it also is just unnecessary because it makes it really fast. Because the wider the road is, it feels safer to go faster. Whereas the narrower it is, you might hit a mailbox, so your car is going to slow down. And so that's a pretty clear connection, both with safety and speed. And that's, I think that it's going to be harder to get the DOT to acknowledge that they're slow moving on this, but I think my conversations with our city engineer, who's the one who does our roads, he's on board, their department's on board, they're forward thinking and understand these principles. So I think if it comes from council, they just take directives from council. So if the council says, we want to make our roads safer, what are the best practice engineering department to make our roads slower and safer? I think we could give them a general directive, including maybe like at least 20 miles per hour plus other improvements. And I think they could come back to you with recommendations. Here are 3 things we think could make a policy that would add to that maybe.
On Berkeley Drive, on what I call the Issaquena side of it, from the bridge, when you talk about where the bridge, the 123 bridge, it's 35 miles an hour on that side. Then once you cross the 123 bridge on the 93 side of Berkeley, it's 30 miles an hour going through there. And so when you're coming downhill from that, it's hard to stay on 30 miles an hour coming down by the school and all. But the reason I'm sure they have it because of the school there, which is good. But there is the difference in speed limit on Berkeley. I drive Berkeley all the time, but so there is a difference. But I think within neighborhoods, I think that we need to have a uniform speed limit, whatever it is, whether the research says 20 or the research says 15. I think we shouldn't just pick a random number. I do think we should try to figure out some kind of research on that and what would be best. I know 15 is slow. that's having to be really slow. So, but yes, I do agree with that on that. But the major roads like Issaquena, Berkeley, those probably need to have a different speed limit on them compared to the neighborhoods.
So how about if we did this then? In terms of a recommendation, that the recommendation be that we recommend that we do a safer street comprehensive program with speed limits, speed bumps, sidewalks, the things we talked about at appropriate levels or some such thing, and not say the speed limit. I mean, Bob will request 15, but I like the idea it should be appropriate. Maybe 20 is better. I don't know what the rules are. My guess is the city engineer does. But maybe Shannon, our recommendation could be that we have a safer streets program that includes speed limit, speed bump, crosswalk, sidewalks, width of roads, the things that Chad said, that we can then leave like we done before with the specification for down the road, but still would get Bob's thing, our support.
Let me read to you what we already have in our recommendations.
Yeah.
So we
okay.
already have one that says, make streets and neighborhoods safe for residents through reduced speed limits, well-marked crosswalks, signage, speed bumps, and other appropriate measures.
Right.
I like the idea of the program though, Fran. To me, that's like, that's a directive to your engineering department to say, we want you to like assess our streets and see what's the best practice and then where are we, and then put a plan in place for remedying that as possible. That sounds different to me than what we have. I don't know if that's whatever you said, Fran, about a program, I think is a nice, it feels like less than something that's gonna be on the comprehensive plan that gets filtered every once in a while, and more hey, engineering department, we want you to like implement this.
Yeah.
So
Well, yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Bill or Brad. Okay, so maybe we could, maybe the recommendation would be something like a comprehensive safer streets program. And then add what you just said, Shannon, as examples of that. And it's a little bit, one of ours sounds a little bit like this, but it was listed, I think, to pedestrian and bike pathways or some such thing that made it more limited, I think, than this, if I remember.
okay, I will write that up and send that out to everybody this afternoon for you to look at.
Sounds good.
Shannon, can you remind us when I think we talked about this previously, but when we sort of start kind of sequencing some of our strategies over a time period, like setting time periods and sort of targets, and so that accountability can happen? Because a lot of our recommendations, understandably, are sort of impossible to measure. To like, how do we know if we've been successful?
We had talked about waiting to do that until council adopts all of these recommendations, but based on the timeline that we're working on now, with the holiday and planning commission schedule, that would not be until July, likely. So I think if that's something that you guys and Fran want to work on before then, we can sure work on that.
I think it's just going to be like the most critical piece of what we do. So whether it comes now or later, I just want to make sure it happens.
I agree, Lisa. I think the only thing that is a little bit of a break on it is maybe waiting to see what some other groups like the housing group and those come up with, because there might be some interactions and some connections that would help decide the priority and the timing of this. And I think, again, Shannon, I'll turn to you, that Brookover said that they're supposed to give recommendations next week or 2 weeks, the housing group.
So the housing group could be ready with their recommendations for next Wednesday. They meet on Monday, so they had a little bit of cleaning up to do. So it'll either be this Wednesday or the following Wednesday.
Okay. Yeah, now some of this, like the speed limit thing could happen immediately, right? So some of these things are going to sort of have a time frame of their own. Others maybe have to relate to what, like the land use planning committee, I think is not going to have a report for a while. So some of these things are going to have to fit in with what that group does, which makes it a little bit more difficult also, in terms of timing anyway.
Right. And I think once we get through this first phase, the timing gets a little tougher because that's when we have to start integrating everybody's recommendations together and figuring out how our recommendations integrate with anything that land use does. So it's going to kind of evolve, I think, as we go through this.
It does seem like the safe street thing could be pulled out pretty quickly and put in the staff's hands. I don't know.
So we have that other one about the signage that is very, I think, directable and can go pretty much directly to staff about creating the wayfinding signage. So I can write this recommendation up so it's similar to that, where it's something that looks like it can be really just handed over to staff and they can start working on it.
Sounds good.
Okay. And I will take a look too, been doing some other research and see if I can find some safer street programs that other cities have done, and it might give us a starting point that we might be able to look at in our committee and kind of go down the list of yes, yes, no, no, and to give staff a starting point too of what specifically we're thinking about.
Shannon, Chad mentioned this, but the city of Greenville did have this conversation about the 20 is Plenty campaign, and they've allocated, I think, $250,000 or so to, I don't know exactly what the campaign involves, but that might just be something to look at. I don't know how successful it's been or is being, but if you're looking at models.
Thanks, Lisa. I will do that.
And the Vision Zero thing, link I put in there is just a Wikipedia quote, but I think that'll be, both of those are good jumping off points for policies. Not have to reinvent the wheel there.
You know, what Lisa just said, I wonder, and I don't know it all, and I'm not speaking as a council member, I'm speaking as an individual. If it would be useful, valuable, appropriate at that budget meeting that's coming up soon, if there was a very flat out request for a safer street budget. I mean, when you just said that, Lisa, if we, I guess at this point would be me, actually go to that meeting and ask for X dollars set aside for a safer street program over the next year. I mean, if that would be a good approach. Again, we're getting ahead of ClemsonNext if we do that, because I don't think that's going to come up. On the other hand, it would certainly put on the radar immediately if council agrees to fund it, get the ball rolling. And I think that's, at least if I heard you right, that's sort of Greenville's approach to this. So maybe, Shannon, we want to talk about for the next meeting an actual budget request to council. Probably run it by Brookover first, because the ClemsonNext anyway, maybe that might not be a bad idea at all.
I think that's a great idea. And I think would send a really positive message to anybody who's worked on this, that just like you said, that you hear all the council conversations that they mean business, but probably not all the citizens do, to just see sort of even incremental progress towards, like, if this is one of those things that probably it doesn't need to, it will never be out of alignment with ClemsonNext. Like, just, you know, making streets safer would just be a good thing no matter what direction ClemsonNext implementation takes.
Yeah.
I would hope the wayfinding could be in there too, because wayfinding is one of those pretty inexpensive in the big scheme of things, but also could be directly related to the safety. So maybe, you know, if you could put both of those under the same umbrella. And we've been doing talking about pilot projects with the Green Crescent Trail for putting signs. I mean, it's the kind of thing that a motivated citizen could fund, you know, to put a few signs here and there. And yet if the city said, we are going to spend $100,000, $50,000, $20,000, I mean, you could get this thing done, and it would be very tangible, impressive, help pedestrian movement, and then add that with a safety program. You could kind of wrap all that up together.
What do you think, Shannon? You're closer to the ClemsonNext bigger plan.
I don't know. Let's talk about this. Let me run it by Bob and see. We haven't gotten that far, honestly, in most of the other, in any of the other groups.
Yeah.
And so the process that we've defined so far has been very straightforward about planning commission, city council. But since it is budget season, we can certainly talk about this and see if there's a way or a process to bring this request to council.
Yeah. That's a great idea. I think if we could do that. I also like the idea that does send a message about how serious we are to do this and get rolling on it. So I like that. Anyway, yeah, and Andy might want to be part of that too. I don't know much about the budgeting process from his perspective.
We can look into it and give you guys an update next week.
Yeah.
All right, Fran, did you have anything else other than that? I was going to have Brad give us an update on the 123 traffic study.
That was it. I mean, again, other than to congratulate and thank this committee, we really got out of the gate pretty quickly, and I think what we put together is really good, and will probably be a guide used by the other groups, to tell you the truth, as they move along. So thank you for doing all this, and I do think it's worth, whether it's every other week or every week, meeting. And at some point, I would like us to get involved with the specific measurable implementation action plan kind of things that would go in the broader recommendations. So that's all I had, Shannon.
Okay, do you guys want, as long as we're talking about meetings, do you guys want to continue to meet every week? Would you like to move to an every other week schedule?
Every other sounds reasonable at this point.
Be more practical. I think
That
something-
work for everyone? Okay,
I agree with every other week, yes.
okay. And I'll continue to send out email updates as I have them. And if you guys have any questions, email, call me, and we can go through those in between meeting times.
And the only other thing, Shannon, if we do that, and I don't know this, but there might come times we need to vote on things that can't necessarily wait another 2 weeks. So just if everybody's okay with, if absolutely necessary, if we need to vote by mail, that would be okay to do, email or poll or Google or what, some kind of online poll, just in case it comes up that there's some need to move quicker than 14 days on something. Everybody's okay with that. Okay.
All right, Brad, do you want to hit us with your update?
Hey, yes. So we had our first meeting last week with the regional partners with Oconee and Pickens County, Clemson University, and ACOG, Appalachian Council of Governments, and also Mayor Halfacre and Andy Londo. ACOG led the meeting. They're going to kind of be the spokesperson for DOT and kind of help achieve funding, which is still a hurdle, but it's attainable. I think we shouldn't have to worry about it. Clemson University was, they understand the need for a traffic study, so they're wanting to participate. I don't know about funding just yet, but everybody else was saying, yeah, we do. Let's try to proceed with it. So we're going to meet again in 2 weeks, I believe, to kind of see what ACOG's been able to get from the DOT and kind of get a general idea of revising the scope of work. And I brought up many questions. I don't want to really, I guess, share it here. I don't want to chew up all the time, but I mentioned preserving the capacity of 123. We're at a level of service of C or D, which means we're around 70 to 80% capacity. And then I also mentioned the perimeter road widening to, I think Todd Barnett was the spokesperson from the university. And he said their timeline from start to finish on that project is 12 to 18 months. And I mentioned, could that serve as a mini bypass for traffic off of 76 in the Pendleton area? He was all for it. They're not going to add speed tables or speed bumps on perimeter. They're going to keep the speed limit the same. They're not going to add any more signals, I don't believe. They are doing their streetscaping and wider bike lanes and sidewalks and whatnot. It's going to look really nice. But that's a potential mini bypass to relieve some of the congestion off 123. I had a traffic engineer that I work in tandem with just about every day. We looked at it, spent some volunteer time on it, and it will help. But we've got to figure out how we can, or when we can, integrate the real-time traffic alerts for this little mini bypass that I'm calling it unofficial, but Fran probably called it, but That's kind of where I want to focus a little bit on the traffic study about, time travel runs and relieving some congestion. I don't foresee, or I'm not in favor of that being a commercial truck route or having freight traffic go down perimeter just because of the safety factor of it. But definitely non-commercial traffic coming off of out of Anderson, Pendleton can definitely, use that route now and save some minutes. I think if we had the real-time traffic alerts, because if you're at the bridge going northbound, if it's backed up there, I think I mentioned this before, you're 9 to 11 minutes to get up to the main signal at College Ave, and then from College Ave to the signal at 76, it's an additional 2 to 3 minutes during the peak hour times. We've got to figure out when our peak hour times is during, all the schools are in session, because the students generate odd peak hour times of the day. I've seen it at 2 or 3 o'clock backed up, and then it's just like that all the way through about 6 or 7. And then if you're going southbound, and if it's backed up in between the signal at Publix and the State Credit Union Bank, you're at about 10 to 11, 12 minutes there to get through there. If the drive-throughs are backed out on 123. So, and also mentioned the mitigation, access mitigation plan for 123, interconnecting parcels for our restaurants. All that's was, welcomed with a lot of support. So Fran, I want to talk to you real quick about the budget. Are we going to see any type of traffic mitigation spending for this budget for this year? Anything from the comp plan and the transportation element? Because there's a few things in there like the real-time travel alerts and signage for 123 telling through traffic to use the left lane. That would have a beneficial impact, an immediate impact, to be honest with you.
Yeah, honestly, I don't know, Brad. I'll check. If you want to just write me a quick note and see if there's anything that's specific in the budget. I don't know.
Okay.
That's a good
All right.
question.
And I also propose, after this next meeting with ACOG, maybe next couple of months, that this committee have a workshop with council. I don't know if what you all feel. I think it's warranted because of what's in the comp plan and all of our volunteer work here. We all want to see some type of something come out of all this. So I just think maybe getting council to really start to think about, let's start spending something that's in the comp plan. Let's look at the transportation element. Let's look at land use, and maybe it warrants a workshop with council in the near future.
Brad, I'm just out of curiosity, one with the way those traffic alerts work is I've seen, like in Atlanta, for example, when you're going down the perimeter, to say the perimeter is going to be 50 minutes, this connector is going to be 20 minutes. Is it that kind of thing that tells you should go left instead of right because it's measuring traffic with cameras or something?
Yeah, so it's integrated with AirSage. I don't know. Look up AirSage. Are you familiar with that or even heard of that company? So it's just basically cell phone tracking. And that's kind of how they come up with these real-time travel alerts. And it's very effective. AirSage is out of Atlanta. So, I mean, you could, I think the origin and destination from the east to west of Clemson being, okay, if you're coming up 76, what is the real-time travel to get up to 93 and 123 in Oconee County? And then what is the coming from Oconee on 123? What is the I guess the ETA to get to this signal at Old Stone Church? Maybe kind of use that as to help motorists say, okay, it's definitely quicker to go down perimeter now, or certain peak hour times of the day. Like I said, we've got to establish that it's still quicker to go down 123 than go 76. So all that was welcome with support. I don't think the university is going to pitch in on the real-time travel alerts. It's I don't know what the price tag of that. It's not too terribly expensive, but then again, when I say $100,000, $200,000 not being too terribly expensive with traffic, council may think that that's just way too expensive for the city right now. I don't know, but all this is just stuff that I mentioned, and it was welcome with a lot of support. So.
I think it's similar to the pedestrian stuff. These are things that have been mentioned for years. 123 is obviously a big complaint.
Right.
Pedestrian sidewalks is a big complaint. So the sooner you can show if there's a tangible project that makes sense and it's coming from best practices and it's not, building a bypass is one thing that's got to be thought of, that's a major expense. But if you're talking about these kinds of things that can be fit into a budget, that, I don't know, that seems like a good recommendation to me.
Yeah, thanks. I thought so too. It's not going to cost 100 million. It's not going to cost 20 million. I think we're looking at a couple 100,000. And even I've already looked at a message board for 123 to go right there in front of the police department. It's permanent, and you're looking at about 80 grand. And there's a controller in the dispatch, which they can kind of control and say commercial / through traffic, use left lane. Because the trucks are not going to, the DOT mandated commercial trucking routes are your major US routes. And so you're not going to be able to funnel the freight traffic around Clemson. They're going to have to use 123. That's just how it is. They can't come up exits 1 and 2 to get into Oconee. They got to go down to exit 19, come up 76 and 123 because of the bridge restrictions. So, but this is a way to get non-motorist traffic kind of off 123 to kind of release some of the congestion and make it a little bit more safer for pedestrians that we're seeing. And I've got video I captured from 2017, and then just recently kind of just been out and about this past spring, and I'm seeing more pedestrians cross 123 College Ave than 4 years ago. So we're definitely seeing more pedestrians, which is a good thing. It's less cars on the road, and a lot of them are students. So that's about all I have right now. Anybody have any questions? I'll have more in a couple of weeks. Hopefully next time we do meet, I'll have more. And this meeting was recorded. I'm not sure if you can search on YouTube since it was set up by ACOG. I don't know if they've released it or not, but if anybody wants to listen to it, or maybe talk, or Fran, maybe you can talk with Andy and see if he can publish it.
Okay. So Brett, I continue to get questions and comments about a bypass. Is that anywhere in the plan, anywhere in the conversation you had yesterday? Sort of give me the definitive position on the bypass and that idea.
Yeah, it was talked about, but it's just too costly. And as Mr. Stone said, DeWitt Stone, that I think a lot of the land is being bought up already. 20 years ago, it would definitely what could have happened. Problem with the bypass though is you're probably looking at something that's going to be so far out where it's going to take you 20 plus minutes of extra drive time just to go around, then as opposed to just going straight to 123. But there is support. They still want to keep it kind of in the back of their minds, and I'm kind of curious on what ACOG is going to come back after they speak with the DOT. But to do something like that, especially on the north side, all the streams and tributaries that you're going to have to build an overpass for, you're going to have to do all these EPA studies. It's going to take 10 or 15 years to do these studies, and it's going to be very costly. It's going to be very time consuming, and then you got to get to that point. Okay, here we are. Here's all the studies. Does it make sense to continue with this bypass in this area? Now, Scott Mulder with Oconee County brought up connectivity with Shiloh Road as kind of a bypass, but that doesn't really serve bypass around 123. That just kind of helps traffic from Oconee County get quicker to Anderson County. So there's really no better solution. I wish I had a magic wand where I can say, okay, railroad's moving north. We're going to use their old road bed as the bypass. That'd be perfect, but we all know that's not going to happen. So it's a slim chance, but it's definitely there. But the infrastructure bill coming out from the federal government, we'll have to see how much we get. It's still possible, and we still need to keep pushing for it.
Okay, thanks, Brad.
This is citizen speaking. I just think we ought to push back hard. But keep it in the background if that's. But I think we have so many practical things we can invest money in the short term, including traffic mitigation money. That as a transportation committee, my vote would be to say, we got other problems we can actually solve. We got other money that needs to be spent. Let's just take that. I just don't think it's such, for all the reasons Brad mentioned. And also other reasons that it doesn't make sense environmentally. It's not a good fit for our area. We just ought to push. I want to push back hard and say, if federal money, 20 million in federal money land in our lap, there's lots of other things we could do with that money that would be such an improvement on quality of life and transportation. We might have to deal with a little more traffic on 123 in the long run, but our rest of our city our transportation would be magnificent. So I think that just needs to be a clear message. That's me. One little.
I agree, Chad. I'm right there with you. Like I said, there's some things in the comp plan that can have immediate beneficial impact that we really need to look at. And one of them is the real-time travel alerts that kind of help motorists gauge, okay, let's not go down 123, let's go down perimeter. And then better connectivity amongst our city streets, but safer connectivity with, sidewalks. And one thing about the speeds and the neighborhoods, I got a couple of radar guns. I've clocked delivery, FedEx and UPS out here in front of my house. I've clocked them at 32 miles per hour, which this should be 20. And I've also clocked a couple of school buses a couple of years ago that I had to call the school board on, and they were going close to 30. So if you say 15, people are going to fudge and go 20 or 25 because they think, oh, well, I can go 10 over or 15 over on the highway. They think they're just not educated enough to know that in city streets, it's a little bit different. So, I'm a sticker for, 15 or 20, but if you put it at 20, people are going to go 25, 27. They're always going to fudge. That's what I've seen doing these LPR studies and doing these HOA speed reduction plans where they either want stop signs or speed bumps, and where half of the residents that want speed bumps, so they send me out to do a speed study, and that's what I would see. We put up a temporary speed limit sign at 15, 20, and 25, and they always go over. So you just got to be careful if we want to do a citywide speed limit ordinance at 15 or 20. I don't think it should be any more than 20, but we got to be careful. If we want to go to 15, we're going to go 20. If we want to go 20, we're going to go 25. So just put that. That's just a little comment, something to think about.
Hey,
I just want to say I totally agree with what Chad said regarding the bypass, and he said it well, so I'll just leave it at that. And also regarding the mileage, whatever our recommendation is, as Brad was saying, people fudge, but sometimes it's unintentional. It's just for the reasons that Chad was saying, like if the road is built to support a higher speed and there's no indications to make you go slower other than a speed limit sign, people are just going to go faster unknowingly. So I really like that we broadened our recommendation to include all of those other cues. And ideally it could include making streets, I guess not as wide, but even if it's just the signage and the pedestrian signals, I think that all of that goes a long way beyond just posting a speed limit sign that few people are going to follow because the road is so wide.
Brad, do you know if the city has a uniform speed ordinance right now?
I don't think so.
Okay.
If they do, I haven't seen anything.
Yeah, okay.
Right now, the only traffic mitigation we have on Berkeley Drive is when I walk up there and people are speeding, I start going like this, and I'm that crazy guy on the side of the road yelling at them, slow down on my road.
So maybe we recommend that we hire Chad and an army of Chads to be at every street corner in the city.
Yeah, I'm going to guilt. We need a little shame. Is there a shame policy we can add to the city? Is that allowed?
Okay, and anything else, Shannon, for today?
That's all. Unless anybody has anything else you want to bring up? New business, old business?
I do have something. It's related to Brad's traffic study and something going on right now with the Green Crescent Trail. I mentioned this a couple meetings ago that we've had really good meetings with the university, Oconee County, city officials, the Friends of the Green Crescent. We want to bring in Central and Pendleton for it's a committee basically to try to integrate pedestrian bike infrastructure among all these entities. And that's been a long time coming. And we've also been working on maybe trying to get some additional state funding from our state representative, Jerry Carter, and our Senator Thomas Alexander are going to be working on this, trying to get in the budget for maybe in the additional budget that's coming out in June for some of these things. And yeah, one of the questions I think Senator Alexander had was that they really like the regional aspect of it. If you want to get state money, if you want to get federal money, when you're coming together with multiple entities working on a project together, that gets you at the top of the list. And so I think that's just something we need to keep in mind. And my question was, how much is this traffic study that's being talked about just 123? And could we have a sideline? This conversation is already happening, but maybe
Yes.
integrating these conversations of we need to have a regional pedestrian bike integration, and not just a plan, but like how can we integrate it? Because there's already some plans there. So I just want to see your thoughts on that, Brad.
No, it's definitely being rolled into the traffic study too. I like to see the GCT be a part of it, be a part of the study. Sure, all the connectivity from Central all the way into university. Yeah, absolutely. And the university mentioned their support for the GCT and their involvement too last week. So
yeah. Definitely. It seems like it's the same party. So I guess just make sure we're all talking and integrating. And if it needs to be under the umbrella of that just feel free to bring that in and say, hey, we need to have these meetings together or sidelined, or just want to make sure that's all together and integrated, because they're both really good movements.
Correct.
It needed to happen for a while.
I agree. Yeah, I'll make sure that I'll touch base on that in a couple of weeks, our next meeting. But yeah, it was brought up, and it's good. It's going to be a part of the study. And I think Seneca or Oconee along the lake is kind of want to do a similar trail, but not sure yet if that's ever going to get off the ground.
Yeah, got it.
All right. There's nothing else, then we will plan to meet again on June 4th.
Okay, just before we go, I did actually just look up the city's ordinances. And if you're interested, section or chapter 18 of the city ordinance of city codes is related to transportation and traffic. And section 18-3 lists the powers and duties of the police chief. And it looks like, I read this very quickly, the chief has the authority to set speed limits, sidewalks, all kinds of different signage, those kind of things. So I'll read this more closely if you want to look at section 18-3, not in the zoning ordinance, in the city ordinances. And that whole chapter is about traffic, but 18.3-3 is pretty interesting in terms of the authority. And it looks like these things can happen pretty quickly if Chief Campos deems them necessary. That's all I had, Shannon. Great.
Well, it was good to see everybody this week. We'll meet again in 2 weeks. I will send you out some updates in between now and then. If you guys have anything that comes up that you want to share, you can send it to me or send it to the whole group.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Have a good weekend.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody.